safeguard someone's green card and money? Because this is a question everybody wants to hear.
We've got about 70 employees, 4 in-house business attorneys, 3 economists, now 7 accountants. But we handle the vast majority of all that work in-house. We're going to fight tooth and nail for our investors. If you want to risk your return of capital for a faster visa, I guess you can do that, but I don't think that that's the goal of the investors. We've never had a project in outlet.
Very few people can brag about that. Hello everybody, this is Arindam. Today we have with us Matt from CMB, and the idea is as a founder of EduFund, we've got so many parents who reach out to us to know about EB-5, which is the investment immigration program for US. And we thought a great way of answering a lot of their questions is to talk to somebody, talk to a regional center actually who's been in the industry for close to 30 years. Welcome, Matt.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Thanks. My first question to you is, look, we often keep hearing from your teammate and other people that CMB is one of the longest or the oldest standing regional center. Tell us a little bit about your evolution, about your history, track record.
We were actually the second oldest regional center in the industry. Second regional center to ever receive USCIS designation. So that was all the way back in 1997. So yeah, we're right about 28 years right now of history at CMB. We've worked with about 6,700 clients, many clients here in India, but we have clients from 104 different countries. People constantly ask us, what is CMB? What does CMB mean? What's that acronym? And that actually stands for Closed Military Base. Our company was founded by my uncle, so Pat Hogan, and Pat has actually been in EB-5 longer than the regional center program itself. He got started in EB-5, the regional center program that is, in doing seed capital investments to revitalize military bases in the United States that had been closed. The first base that we took on projects at was the former Norton Air Force Base in San Bernardino, California. The base, prior to its closure, employed about 10,000 people from the local community. And when it closed, 10,000 people all of a sudden lost their jobs. It destroyed that community. You had rampant crime, high unemployment. You had it led the nation in home foreclosures for years and years and years. The city eventually even went bankrupt. EB-5, I said, served as seed capital to put in new roads, new infrastructure to interconnect those military bases with the local communities, do a lot of demolition, do a lot of remediation work and cleanup after the military had left. Norton Air Force Base in particular is now home to FedEx, UPS, Amazon's West Coast air operations are based out of that former Norton Air Force Base. By about 2018, they had announced the jobs had returned. And it's like the perfect application of EB-5, and that's our history. That's where we started.
That's very impressive. Thank you for sharing that. I'm just very impressed that you guys started from 97.
Yeah.
I was in high school back then. Just a follow-up question on that. So is your uncle, is he still active in the business?
He is. So he's the CEO of CMB. He's still active, but what's another kind of unique feature about CMB is we are a family company. So his daughter, Noreen, my cousin, is our president. When investors sign up in EB-5, it's not just a one-time transaction. They're in, they're out. They're there for 6-7 years sometimes before they complete their full immigration process. So there are regional centers that have been around for a while that really don't have a legacy plan in place. Yeah, so right now I think we're on our 95th EB-5 partnership. CMB was the regional center that invented the loan model, how the program has evolved. And what I mean by that is that, the EB-5 program, to a certain extent, the USCIS for a long time was trying to figure out how the program should work. Some of our early projects that we would have taken on, although they have the same core structure, that loan model, or the terms of our limited partnership agreements, our partnership agreements have stayed largely the same, probably 99% the same throughout our entire history. We've never had a project denial. So I mentioned we have 100%. If I didn't mention, I should mention, we have a 100% success rate from our projects. From a project standpoint, we don't anticipate that we're going to have those denials because we're very careful in the way in which we structure our projects. We don't deviate from our core model. We know that what we've put together in the past has been approvable. And if we continue to stick to that same model, we stay conservative. We don't, try untested new, unique strategies to jam square pegs into round holes, that we're probably going to continue to maintain that track record. We are definitely unique within the industry. We've got about 70 employees. We have 4 in-house business attorneys. There's not many regional centers with 1 in-house business attorney, let alone 4. We have our own economists on staff in-house. We have 3 economists on staff in-house at CMB, not consultants, not people that kind of moonlight doing other things. These are our full-time employees. At CMB, not only do we have our investor relations team and our team that works with our investors who have already invested, our investor support team. We have our entire admin staff. We have, I believe now, 7 accountants on staff. We have our project development team. We have a finance team for specific underwriting. And we have a compliance team, an in-house compliance team from a project standpoint. We also have a sister company, CMB Swissco, which has, a full-time employee here in India, in China, in Vietnam, a handful of other places. And so we have people in time zone as well. And so we can work with our clients through each phase of their process. They can rely on us. They can ask questions at any point in time. They can get detailed information, ask detailed questions, and get quality responses because we have those people on staff in-house that can answer those questions. We're collecting the spending data and the job creation data in real time as our projects go on. And we're preparing those I-8 to 9 templates in-house. And investors go through those stages at different points in time. And you can't always rely on third parties to be able to move as quickly as the investors may need them to move. So you've got to be able to be on your toes. You've got to be able to provide not only timely feedback, but quality feedback to those investors. Having those people in-house and trained specifically to do the things that we need them to do is incredibly important.
If I could almost say, there are 2 trends that I see in most CMB projects. One is there's always a bank that's a senior, usually. And the second is a lot of your projects are in HUA.
Yeah. Just because you're the first lien holder in a project doesn't mean you're a qualified senior construction lender.
Correct.
And so there are a lot of regional centers out there that have limited experience that, will tout that they're the first lien holder. What are they going to do if they have to foreclose on the asset?
That's very true. I see so many of these where there's no exit, like on a bad day.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, they're saying that they're going to have, full control over what happens, but you still have to operate that asset. Do they have the experience to do that? Do they have the balance sheet to step in and perform some of those roles in advance of the project getting back on its feet? We have structured, like I said, we've structured several deals where we're the first lien lender, but it requires an entirely different level of involvement in the project, entirely different level of due diligence and safety measures that are in place and compliance measures that are in place. You have to have the team to do it, and we have the team to do it. You got to be prepared to operate as a senior lender, and a lot of these regional centers that are taking that position are not prepared to do that, and so it's almost unfortunate that they're taking those positions because they probably can't fulfill the role that a senior lender needs to fulfill. There's a misconception out there that some people will say, oh, well, if you're a mezzanine lender and you've got a senior lender in the project and it's a U.S. bank or Bank of America or JP Morgan, whatever, that they've done due diligence and therefore it's a good project. Well, it's a good project for them. It may not be a good project for the subordinated lenders. So even when we are mezzanine debt, we do have to do robust due diligence. We have to negotiate intercreditor agreements with those construction lenders and make sure that we're protected and we can protect our investors and that we're comfortable with the leverage position that we're in. And so even when we're not senior lenders, we've got to be prepared for all of those things. But when you do have a senior lender in the deal, typically you can rely to a certain extent on the idea that there is another set of eyes on the project.
That's what I always say. There's a co-pilot.
There's a co-pilot. There's another set of eyes on the project, and a lot of those lenders are regulated by the U.S. government. And so they have very strict structures in place that they have to follow from a compliance standpoint. They have to make sure the project meets certain standards. They have to report to the government if it's not. Regional centers are way over levering the construction debt. They're saying, hey, we're the first lien lender, but they're taking the position of the first lien lender and the mezz debt. So they're doing a 75% loan to cost stretch senior or an 80% loan to cost stretch senior. That's a massive chunk of the capital structure, and they're taking on a huge amount of risk. They're not bifurcating that risk amongst a senior position and a mezz position. When they're going in at 80% of the capital structure, they're playing with everybody's money, right? They're not necessarily eliminating risk because they're the only lender in the capital structure in situations like that. They may be over-levering a project, and the investors may pay the price for that at some point in time.
So you said something very interesting, loan to cost, right? So for an average Joe, how will you explain why is loan to cost and loan to value important for success?
If you're looking at a project, especially in EB-5, what are the most important things about EB-5? And what we always say is it needs to run in parallel to the goals of the investor, right? So from a loan to cost standpoint, how do you get comfortable with the idea that the project's going to be completed? You make sure the developer has an adequate amount of capital in the project, skin in the game, if you will. There are regional centers out there that will say like, oh, it's got to be X percent, or it's, whatever. No, it's got to be commensurate to the quality and the type of the project. So, or the draw that the developer has, or the commitment that the developer has to that project, to the partners involved, to the asset class, and all those things vary. So you may have a logistics project. We do a lot of those where you've already got a signed long-term lease agreement with a tenant, and you've got a developer that's provided a completion guarantee, and you may even have a buyer in place who's going to acquire that asset after completion. Well, do I really need my developer to have 20 or 25% equity in that deal? Probably not. It's unlikely they're going to walk away from a project that's already pre-leased and pre-sold, especially when they've provided certain guarantees, right?
Makes sense.
Now, if you don't have those things in place and you're building an asset in a remote area on a piece of land that's been 4 times overvalued, I'd be pretty weary about a developer walking away from a project like that. So I would want to know how much cash that developer actually has. Is it all land value? Are they actually putting money into that deal? Well, let's say they valued the land asset quadruple what it's should be valued at, or what they paid for it, and they're calling that their equity. Well, they're going to collect developer fees over the course of the construction, and they might be out of, they may have no longer have any risk, no longer, need to have the project be successful in order to walk away and have made money or gotten rid of the land asset they couldn't otherwise do anything with. We see that a lot in the rural projects that we've underwritten and that we've turned away. And so it's something that you have to be careful of. So from a loan to cost standpoint, we like to make sure that the developer has an appropriate amount of capital in the project to ensure that they're going to stay committed to that project through its construction phase. From a loan to value standpoint, it's more so about how do I make sure that I'm protected from loss. So I may have a project where I'm very comfortable at 80% loan to cost in a mezzanine position. I have a certain amount of capital there. I'm comfortable in the market that project's located in. I'm comfortable that the business plan of the developer is going to be executed, and that they can ultimately refinance or sell that. And that if there is devaluation of the asset, I'm still going to be, right side up. I'm not going to be upside down on the loan or underwater on the loan. That's all part of any, traditional underwriting practice that you would need to go through. You need to make sure that the value is in that asset. You need to understand the market conditions. You can never solely rely on the pro forma of the developer. You have to stress test that. You have to compare it to, third-party appraisals or market studies to give you a better idea as to what the real value of that asset or the real ability of that asset to be able to generate revenue is going to be. And you've got to get comfortable knowing that if it does lose value, how much can it lose and you still be protected?
Right.
And so you don't want to way over lever it and go in at 90, 95+% loan to value, because then you have a very thin margin for loss there. So you need to be careful with that.
So one thing I would like to touch upon is there's always this debate, and it gets sometimes a battle to nowhere, which is urban versus rural. And I see your portfolio has a lot of urban. So I'd like to know how you think about this, because I'm sure you get grilled a lot when you structure these projects and you're bringing them to the market.
I like that you described it as, our portfolio. If you look at our portfolio pre-RIA, it doesn't look that much different than our portfolio post-RIA. It's because throughout our history, we've been focused on finding the opportunities that we think are the best fit for the investors and that are the safest opportunities that we can make available to those investors. If you look at the portfolios of virtually every regional center in the industry, you're going to be hard-pressed to find rural projects pre-RIA. Well,
correct. Very true. Very true.
Did rural projects all of a sudden become safer or less risky or better in some way? No. Regional centers are out there desperately trying to, I mentioned it earlier, force square pegs into round holes by trying to find rural projects that they can easily market to investors. If you want to risk your return of capital for a faster visa, I guess, you can do that. But I don't think that that's the goal of the investors. I think they want the visa, but I think they also want their capital returned. You look at the challenges facing rural projects, and this all has to go into your underwriting decisions. They're outside of major metropolitan areas, so they lack a lot of the basic infrastructure that's needed to support that project, which means you got to build a lot of that out, which raises your overall cost basis for those projects. They're extremely sensitive to market volatility. A lot of these projects that are out there are resorts and spas and hotels and things like that are going to be based on a strong economy where people are prioritizing leisure travel. If you have economic downturns, that's the first thing that people get rid of. They stop spending money on leisure travel and things like that. And I think there's that can be very challenging to some of these projects that I've seen out there. I mentioned it earlier too. I think, there are a lot of people that are saying, hey, I can be a senior lender on these rural projects. Well, why are they all of a sudden getting an opportunity to be a senior lender on these projects? Well, interest rates have been a little bit higher, but if you look at the interest rates that these rural projects would traditionally bank debt, you're talking about, high single digits, low double digits. Well, that's a pretty significant indicator of risk. If banks are pricing their debt in the high single digits and low double digits on these projects, why would a regional center do it at 6% or 7%? Why would they do that? We have been very careful. We've taken on rural projects, and we're going to continue to look for quality rural projects. And when we find them, we'll be excited to put those on the market and avail those to investors. But we're not going to take undue risk.
Well, thank you for that. I think you touched a point in my next question, which is, look, if you've existed so long, obviously you've had projects that have not done as expected, right? And I think that happens with any business that's lived that long. When you hit a project which is now not going as per plan, what do you guys do? What is your risk mitigation?
We don't have any problem talking about. There are a lot of regional centers that would probably say, hey, don't ask that question. Cut, we'll jump ahead, But at CMB, we know that if we're going to take on projects in volume and we're going to be around for a long time, there are going to be economic changes. There are going to be things that impact our projects. There are going to be projects that, underwrote very well and just don't perform the way that you expected them to. and you've got to be prepared to address those. And at CMB, CMB has the track record to support that we've been able to put quality projects together. But by having that track record and that history, we've also had, the revenue and cash flow available to reinvest into our company, to put additional staff in place that can help work on projects that have challenges or monitor projects more closely to hopefully try and head off or avoid challenges that exist. But it also allows us to be very proactive in addressing challenges. I think what's important for people to realize is that the regional centers are not responsible generally for paying for the costs associated to a project that's struggling. The investors are. So you can have a regional center that's going to go fight for those investors and start spending the money to take legal action if necessary, or bring in a third party to assist in negotiations or asset management or whatever you need in a scenario in which a project is struggling or there's a default, or you have to take some sort of action or enforce the terms and condition of your loan. And then there are other regional centers that don't have the ability to do that and are essentially going to leave it on the doorstep of the investors or walk away from the project. And we've seen that in the industry before, where the regional centers just say, hey, sorry, we tried, not our problem. And that's just never been CMB. We're going to fight tooth and nail for our investors. We have no problem talking about the projects that have faced challenges, because CMB is confident in everything we've done to try and resolve those challenges. And we've been successful in several of those instances in which we've had to step in and enforce terms and conditions of our loan agreement. So there are scenarios in which you have to be proactive. You have to be able to pursue your remedies against that borrower and force them into a position to comply with the terms and conditions of the loan, or come up with a strategy in which they can resolve the default and ultimately repay the debt. If you're not prepared to do that, you're playing with the investor's capital. There are projects where CMB has had to take over ownership and operations of the assets. That's not something you want to do. It's something you have to do to try and do everything you can to protect an investor's investment. Fortunately, we've never had a project that's failed to create the jobs, but COVID impacted the operations of several projects. You think of hospitality in EB-5. There's very few regional centers that didn't have a hospitality project. And there's very few regional centers that had a hospitality project that made it through COVID completely unscathed with no issue.
You'd have to be extremely lucky to do.
You'd have to be extremely lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. Just while we're at projects, one thing that came to my mind is one of the cornerstones of your great track record is your partnership with Hillwood. I see that a lot. Tell us, how did that partnership come about and the evolution of it?
Yeah. So, earlier I talked about our history and how we got started on those closed military bases. Well, so, kind of mid to late 2000s, when CMB was getting very active on those military bases, Hillwood was actually serving as the master developer of the former Norton Air Force Base. So we were participating as a lender to the local entity, the Joint Powers Authority, that was managing and implementing the redevelopment strategy for the base. So that was a public entity that we were loaning to that was essentially creating a new platform, new blank canvas for a developer like Hillwood to come in and redevelop that base. And so we had crossed paths with them a couple of times, and at that time we were loaning specifically to those government entities, those government affiliated entities, but we were starting to branch out into making loans to private entities as well. So we were looking at a number of different private loans. We had made a couple of different private loans already. And in 2012, all the pieces came in place, and we eventually reconnected with Hillwood. Hillwood had been exploring EB-5 for a little while, and they actually reached out to us and said, hey, we know you guys. We've seen what you've done at Norton Air Force Base. We've done a little homework on you guys, and we think that you're the group that has all the right pieces in place. You have a company with high integrity. Your reputation, your track record is important, and ours is important to us. So we're not going to just work with anybody in this industry. Hillwood is one of the top real estate developers in the United States. They're the real estate development arm of the Perot family, based out of Dallas. And so Ross Perot Sr., the patriarch of that family, passed away a few years ago, but was an incredible businessman and ultimately ran for president as an independent, a third-party candidate in 1992 and 1996. And his son, Ross Perot Jr., is the chairman of Hillwood. He founded it in 1988. And he's built it into a really tremendous company focused on logistics, two core asset classes, logistics, so industrial warehouses, and then master plan residential communities. They love those two asset classes. They can perform in those asset classes. They have a great track record. We've now done 44 separate EB-5 investment partnerships with Hillwood. I think in total we're 94 EB-5 partnerships. 44 of those 94 are with Hillwood.
I find that very impressive and very different from a lot of other regional centers, because when you see different regional centers, it's almost like different offerings have different developers.
Yeah.
Whereas here obviously I'm sure you work with different developers also, but Hillwood is a name that you work a lot with.
Yeah.
So it was, I was very, surprised, and I think it's awesome.
Well, and I'll tell you why. We have a, somewhat simple philosophy at CMB that I think a lot of people have. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
And so we've been able to build a business model with Hillwood over the years, and it's been able to allow, it's allowed us to continue to build projects that have the same core structure over and over again. So the wrapper might change, it might be a residential community outside of Dallas, or it might be a logistics building, in Virginia. But the core structure, the way in which we structure our loan, our offering, is structured the same as all of our other offerings. The way we build those EB-5 petitions and the way we present those projects to USCIS stays nearly identical. And what does that do? It creates a project that has been approvable and can continue to be approvable over time. As long as USCIS doesn't change the rules, and even if they do, I think we would still navigate those challenges and those changes, and we'd adapt to it. But we don't ever expect to submit a project to USCIS, especially a Hillwood project, that USCIS is going to challenge or deny, because they're the same core model that they're seeing over and over again. The other thing that's just critical to a relationship like that is trust. The integrity of that company is just the second to none. The leadership that they have at that company is just tremendous. And, they're very conservative. One of the things that really, impressed me with them is just their patience. They're a company that's built a massive portfolio, and the projects that we raise EB-5 for is just a small percentage of those projects, because not all of them qualify as high unemployment areas or rural projects, right? And so we're just looking at a small percentage of their overall pipeline that we're funding with EB-5. But, post-COVID, when development and construction started to slow down, when interest rates increased, they just slowed down a little bit. They didn't take on as many projects. So
Nice.
We didn't quite have the same robust pipeline with them of projects one after another after another. They were a little fewer and further between. But that's because they were willing to ride those waves and to sit out and wait for the opportunities in the markets to improve. We're going to just rush into completing projects on lesser margins and taking greater risk. That's something that's incredibly important to us. We're not going to do that either. And so, they're very strict in their underwriting standards. One of the knocks on Hillwood, if there are any, is that we haven't done a rural project with Hillwood.
Yeah.
Well, investors ask us all the time, why haven't you done a rural project? Why can't Hillwood find a rural project? They're not going to deviate from their underwriting standards. They're not going to take a lesser return or look at projects that are going to carry inherently more risk just to, allow us to put a rural project in the market, sign investors faster or something. Why would we do that? So they're going to continue to stick to their core strengths, to what they think is going to make a quality project. And similarly, those are the projects we want to take on. We don't take on every single Hillwood project. We take on the ones that we think continue to fit and kind of provide the best opportunity for our investors. And Hillwood's going to continue to provide those. And as long as they do and we maintain that relationship, we're going to continue to work with those guys. They're a tremendous group, and we say it all the time. We think it's the best lender-borrower relationship in EB-5. We're not affiliated to them. We don't have an ownership in Hillwood. They don't have an ownership in CMB. We're two completely separate companies that have both benefited from EB-5, and the projects we've been able to take on have been huge in the growth of both of our companies.
Nice. I have two last questions. Thank you for being so patient. So look, we are doing this in India. I'm sure you meet prospects in India, and I'm sure you meet prospects in US. What do you see the difference in how they evaluate the same program, or is there any?
Yeah, I mean there is. So that's a great question. So right now in particular, rural versus HUA is a great example. If you're an investor in the United States, you do not need a rural project. You can file concurrently, and you can adjust status if you're in the United States. You should be focused on quality. You should be picking the best opportunity that's going to give you the highest chance of success at getting your green card and getting your money back. The speed at which you receive your approval and your visa is kind of irrelevant if you're already in the United States, and as long as the category stays current, it is for the time being, right? And so, that's been a huge difference. I think investors are getting blown away by marketing, both in the United States and then in India. So in India, it's very, very competitive. There are a lot of groups, a lot of investors that like to shop around. They're shopping regional centers, they're shopping agencies and various consultants that can help them. And I think unfortunately, and this applies to both investors in India and Indian investors that are in the United States, sometimes people are looking for like the new unique strategy that's gonna set them apart from their neighbor that invested or whatever, right? And I think they get lost in trying to come up with some new way to kind of game the system. And there's really no way to do that in EB-5. You've got to pick quality. You've got to be smart in the decision that you make. You've got to go with what has been proven to work. And my advice to investors, whether they be in India or in the United States, is that they should still be focused on quality.
Okay.
And I say it all the time. Is getting a faster visa worth taking greater risk at losing your capital? Well, to most people, it's not, because whether the investors are in India or they're Indian investors already in the United States, one thing's definitely true: they have no appetite to lose their capital.
True.
That's
I think I can relate to this. One of the investors I've talked to for 6 to 7 months, he's based in Florida. And he went through, I think, almost everything that came in the market in the last 6 to 7 months. And I think you guys have finally impressed him, you and Hillwood. He's, I think, wiring money tomorrow.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think Girish will know who I'm talking about, but yes. So
that's great.
I mean, this works. Everything that you've talked in the last 50, 60 minutes, I think it works and it helps you gain trust.
Yeah, it's trust, and then, perspective from a group that's kind of seen it all, right? And so we've, Pat Hogan, the founder of our company, my uncle, our CEO, he set a standard that we work to uphold and maintain every single day, and that is, if your investors have success, you're going to have success.
Makes sense. That's
what
so
it's
true.
all about.
I think that comes back to the question or the point of asset management. If you deliver value and you're managing expectations right.
Exactly. If we do right by that investor, that investor becomes an advocate for CMB. It might lead to future clients down the road. It might lead to positive marketing outcomes and things like that. Most importantly, we do right by that investor. That investor gets to live their American dream. And that's, one of the most rewarding parts of what we do is when you see this all come to fruition. You see the project get built, you see the investor go through their immigration process and make their way to the United States. And the investors that are in the United States, a lot of them are already in successful careers. Some of them are on H-1Bs or other temporary statuses, and they're transitioning to be there permanently because they've accessed the U.S. and they see what they can achieve there. And then others are working to get there. And when they get there, these are people that make huge impacts on the U.S. economy, not only from their EB-5 investment, from what they bring to the United States when they get there. You know, they're buying homes, and some are setting up businesses and putting their kids in school and becoming, contributing members to the communities. And it's a pretty cool thing when you can see somebody go full circle and make it there.
Well, thank you. Anything you'd like to share with us? Thank you for your time.
No, I think this has been great.
I learned a lot. I'm sure the viewers will say the same, but thank you.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you very much for having me. You guys are a tremendous partner, and we really value what you guys bring to the table day in and day out.
Very kind of.